I'm president of the Friends of the ARNWR National Wildlife Refuge. I'd like to see a show of hands. How many of you have been to the refuge before? And how many have not? Welcome. I'm glad to see that most of you have. That's awesome. Because our local community is taking advantage of this. Those of you who have not, a special welcome to you. I hope that you come back. I hope you haven't had a chance maybe today to look at the amazing exhibits in the visitor center, to walk. I also recommend that when you're here, you bring a friend. We want to spread the word and get people here to enjoy this refuge. And we also, I'm going to put a little plug in for our nature store, which is down the hallway there. Our nature store is open when the visitor center is open. It's completely volunteer run, as is everything about our Friends group. So any profits we have go straight back to the refuge. As a Friends group, our goal is to work with the Fish and Wildlife Service to organize and raise money for the benefit of this refuge. We help them with programs here in the refuge. We have our own programs. We have a monthly speaker series, like today. That runs once a month in, let's see, it's March through June, and then September through November. Usually it's on Wednesday nights. In March and April, it's on Sunday like today. And next month will be a Sunday at the end of the month. The nature store is really nice because we have a lot of guidebooks. Everything in there is either nature themed or local history. We have a lot of cool items. To share a moment here, we've gotten some new things recently. We have lovely hats in a couple of colors for our refuge here. The Kingfisher is a logo that the Friends and the Refuge settled on together a number of years ago. So we have a lovely Kingfisher residence here, and it sort of demonstrates the lovely mixed habitat we have. And we've gotten some new lovely stuffed animals just in for the spring. And for those of you who are history buffs, which I know is a lot of you, We have new refuge mugs, which have a history of the refuge on the back. So all things you can browse at the nature store. All right, let's see. I did pass out some sheets that are making their way around. If you are not on our mailing list, I encourage you to put your email down. We send out once a month a list of events happening on the refuge, any updates like, this trail's flooded, please avoid it, those sorts of things. And let's see. Oh yes, our refreshments. So out on the refreshment table, you will also find information about signing up for a membership, more email, and also I'm asking people if you've got one of those forms on your chair, if you're interested in making suggestions about other kinds of events you'd like to see here, please do. We're always interested in hearing about that. And our refreshments table outside, besides having more forms, it has loads of refreshments, all provided by Friends volunteers. So I really want to thank them. We've had an amazing turnout today, both of people and refreshments, so that's well matched. Please enjoy something if you haven't already. You can get something on your way out. And all organized by our volunteer Jan. So I appreciate everybody very much for making this an even more fun event that way. Let's see, I have no updates from the refuge today other than we do have some trail flooding here and there, so beware of that. The beavers have been very active. And the refuge staff is trying to figure out how best to accommodate folks walking and the beavers. It may take a while to resolve all of it. With the spring waters high, it may be that way for a little while. Now, I am very pleased today, as part of our joint presentation here between the Friends of the Assabet River National Wildlife Refuge and the Stow Historical Society, to introduce Marilyn Zaborski. She is the president of the Stow Historical Society, where she coordinates educational Stow history programs, and she is the school mom at the Stow 1825 West School on Harvard Street. She's also a member of Stow's Ancient Document Committee and a former member of the Stow Historical Commission. After 30 years in the classroom, Marilyn spent 2 years as a member of a 3-person educator focus group at the Boston National Historic Park. And in 2017, she received the Northeast Region Interpretive Volunteer Award from the Boston National Historical Park. From 2007 to 2011, she was teaching American history. She was a coordinator for federal grants for teaching American history for 9 school districts and 44 schools, including districts of Neshoba Regional, Hudson, and Maynard. So you can see she comes to us with a strong background in local history, and she's going to introduce some more people today. Welcome. We're excited to hear about the 1942 Cruise at Stow.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm tethered, so I can't, I have 2 today. Panelists are going to help me. I'd like to introduce Jim Sauda. There he is. He was born in 1929 on Brook Street in Hudson, just down the road here from the refuge. He lived and worked on the 75-acre Sauda farm on Brook Street. Today, the town of Hudson Sauda complex, 8 acres of soccer fields, sit on that part of the family farm. Jim is a U.S. Coast Guard veteran and a longtime Stow resident. He was instrumental in building the Stow's new community center, which features the outstanding COA complex, which is wonderful for the town of Stow. And today, he is going to be, as we show the slides, he's going to be coming in and out and telling us a little bit about the air raid drills during this time, the blackouts, the secret trains running at night, and the touring of these, and he had a tour of this secure military complex as a teenager during the war, and how he managed to pull that off. Beside him is Bill Wick.
Big secret.
Now, Bill was born in 1934 on a farm on Lower White Pond Road, right here, just up a little ways. He's going to share his extended family story of the loss of the farm and his way of life. He is graduated from Hale High School in Stow and attended Boston Fine Arts School, and then transferred to Northeastern University, where he received a BA in mechanical engineering in 1957. When he graduated, he was drafted into the Army. And then he became a mechanical engineer for the U.S. government. in 1962. He and his wife moved to Morristown, New Jersey, where he resides today. He drove about 4.5 hours to be here. Yes, he left at 5:45. We were expecting him at 11. He was at the house at 10. I was so happy. I was so happy. When Bill was in New Jersey, he spent his nights and weekends developing his sculpture and pottery skills. He's an accomplished sculptor, an avid historian. Just get him started. You can't stop him. Currently at Randall Library, 6 of his famous persons, a series of sculptures, are on display upstairs in the historic part of the library. So with that, we are going to begin. I also, before we go too much further, I'd like to thank the Conservation Commission for the overlay maps, the Assessor's Office who helped us with the transfer cards. I'll explain that to you later. The U.S. Army Navy Soldier Center loaned us, they contacted us and they loaned us the Natick Lab's 1950 photo albums after when they took over this land. Absolutely extraordinary. And the Maynard and Hudson Libraries for all their newspapers on microfilm. Here's our panels. We did this program in October of 2016, and we really are a panel of 4. Sylvia and Vivian Wanateo, the sisters, were unable to come here today. Vivian lives in Maynard. Sylvia is in Stow. They have a very vibrant story. Actually, their story leads our whole presentation because theirs farm was the first farm taken by the U.S. government in this area. Just wanted to show you, this is when we did it in 2016, so you can just visualize that they're going to be here. I have their words, and I'm going to be reading their words for them.
Could you have them turn the lights down?
Someone turn the lights down a little bit? Okay, they're working on it. There we go. All right. Okay, we're beginning Lower White Pond Road, 1940. When we started this early in 2016, we thought, how are we going to do this? I realize you're not going to be able to read it. That's okay. Don't even worry about that. So we took a look at the federal census. The census data began at the south end right here and went north. So I'm going to just read you the names to give you an idea who was here in 1940. Down at the bottom is Edward Mason. He's a laborer working in the mill, a wife and 5 children, ages 6 to 20. Melvin Johnson, house painter and wife. They are Norwegian from Norway. We have Carl Campbell. He is the caretaker of the Henry Ford farm. This large area of land was owned by Henry and Clara Ford. The Campbells lived there, wife, 6 children, 4 to 14, a mother-in-law, and 2 little nephews, 4 and 8. They have a house full. They have 3 generations. Then we have Otto Swico and his wife. They're a dairy farmer from Finland. This is Sylvia and Vivian's family. In this house is also Sylvia and Vivian's mother, Elsie, and her husband, John Monateo, and the 2 children, who at this time are 4 and 5. Next up is August Maston. He's a dairy farmer from Finland. Then we have Wayno Parker, who was really Packy. He changed his name, wife and daughter, and he's of Finnish descent. If you notice right here, it's a corner lot because his family's farm is right here. His father, Abram Packy, died in 1920. His mother remarried to Harry Sippo, so it became the Sippo farm. It's a dairy farm, and they're all from Finland. Also in this house are 3 adult children. Then we have Simon Jurgatis. This is Wick's grandparents, his wife. They're from Lithuania. In this house is his uncle Ed, who at this time is an adult. There's 4 grandchildren, 8 to 16. It's Bill's parents, Trivo Wicki, who is a plumber, his wife, who is a Jurgatis, and Bill at this point is 5. Way at the top, whoop, I didn't catch up with that. I'm so sorry. There we go. Way at the top, we have Christian Nelson, who is a dairy farm. They're from Denmark. So he lives with his wife and brother. There's also another house there with Carl Nelson, the son, who's a truck driver, wife, and 3 children, from newborn to 3. So this is a very active, busy road. The school bus coming down between the elementary and high school would be picking up between 18 and 20 children in 1942, just in this section of road. We're going to meet the 2 families on White Pond Road. We're going to start with the Suico-Wanateo family. Here's a picture of Otto and Edla Suico and Elsie. This would be Vivian and Sylvia's mother. And they're Frontier, Wyoming, 1918. They are here in Stow, and this is their 50th anniversary. Now, as I go through this, I am going to be reading their words, and I am putting their pictures in the corner so that you know that these are their words as we go forward. Otto Suico. In 1899, our grandfather, Otto Suico, immigrated to the United States through Ellis Island. He went to Frontier, Wyoming, where his friend John Manson was living and working in a local coal mine. The mine was very eager to hire young, strong, mature men. Otto was hired. He mined coal and repaired coal cars. He lived in a finished boarding house owned by the mine and worked in the coal mine for 17 years when he became sick and was taken to a hospital in Montana. The doctors advised him to find another occupation since he had the first stages of black lung disease. In 1900, our grandmother, Elda Ruska, immigrated from Finland to the United States through Ellis Island. She went to Frontier, Wyoming because her sister Mary and her husband were living there. She was hired by the Finnish boarding house to be the cook, which she did for many years. It was here in Frontier that Edla and married Otto in 1907, and they lived in a small 1-story house on Frontier. Our mother, Elsie, was born in this house in 1912. In 1918, with our grandfather needing a new occupation, he, our grandmother, and our mother, Elsie, packed 3 suitcases, leaving the rest of their belongings behind, and headed to Maynard, Massachusetts, where grandmother's brother, Auntie, lived. My mother gave her toys to a neighbor and took 1 doll with her. We have one picture of Auntie in 1931, and this is Elsie Suico. This was before the girls were born. Here's a picture of the house in early 1920s. Our father grew up on a farm in Finland. My grandparents bought a 40-acre farm at 120 White Pond Road in the spring of 1919. Our property included a 4-bedroom house with a former parlor, a sitting room, dining room, kitchen, pantry, cellar, outhouse, 2-car garage, barn, sheds, and milk house. We had a duck pond, cherry trees, apple trees, a playhouse with running water, curtains, and other furnishings. And in this picture, which we were very excited about because we saw the turkeys and the animals on the farm, look behind it. There are the apple and cherry trees. Our grandfather purchased more land from Henry Ford a few years later. Henry and Claire Ford never lived in the house, which was south of ours. It was the old Gately house. At first, workers at Ford's Wayside Inn lived there. Then there were caretakers. The last family was the Campbells. Late 20s. 1930 census, you can see the dairy farmers. This is in between. Elsie has married and Sylvia has been born. By 1936, there were 4 wells on the farm. The little girls on the left are standing on the wellhead, and take a look at the open landscape. And then we have another picture beside a little tree. And for any of you remember those wool snowsuits? That's what they have on. Here they are. I love this picture. Their father actually created their tractor out of an old model Ford. And we have Vivian on the seat and Sylvia standing on the hood. Vivian wanted me to explain to you about this picture. It's a very sweet picture. She is in that little pedal car, except the pedal car belongs to Sylvia. If you take a look at Sylvia's face, she's hugging that doll. She is not happy. And Vivian says that with a very big smile. By 1940, you can see we have 3 generations living in this house. We had a lot of company on the farm, especially on the weekends. This was a time to visit neighbors. Actually, the Finnish in the area of Stow were the neighborhood. And between Stow and Maynard, there's a very large Finnish population. Fitchburg also had a very large Finnish population. This is another Finnish family they were visiting with. Pilot Grove School was the main elementary school in Stow at this time, and here they are in 1st and 2nd grade. In 1989, the Beacon did a wonderful article about their mother, Elsie, was the main person interviewed, and they posed for this picture for the Beacon. It's a wonderful, wonderful article. Now we're going to go up the road a little bit to the Eugatis Wiki family area. We can't quite see the names down there. This is Elizabeth and Simon Eugatis, Bill's grandparents. We had to trace the family, trying to figure out when they came to the United States. The family, Bill and his cousins didn't have all that information. Did you, Bill? I don't think so. Okay. He's in Lithuania. He immigrated in 1895. We first found them in New Haven, Connecticut as a true immigrant. He's working in a mill, or he's working in the factory. His wife is also from Lithuania, and since he's immigrated, there's 4 children born. 1920, we found them in Chelsea. He's working for a rubber company, and this time the oldest daughter, Agnes, is a weaver in a cotton mill, and Emma's packing in a rubber company. 1930, we find them on White Pond Road. We did not go down to the registry in South Middlesex Registry to find out exactly when they bought the house, but we know that Edward registered to vote in Stow in 1926, and one of Wick's cousins was born in 1924 in Stow. So somewhere between those dates, they bought this house in Stow. And in 1934, Wick's parents married, and Bill was born. 1940, this house was very busy. They had the grandparents, plus an adult son, 4 grandchildren living here. Wick's family, and under rented home, we would have had Bill's name. It's not shown on the screen. 1941, Bill's father, Toivrol, built a little house right across the road from the Eugatis farm on White Pond Road. We have a few pictures. This is Martha Eugatis. We think it's in Chelsea. This is Wick's mother, age 3, another sister, 10, and brother Edward, 12. We do not know who George is. Here are the 2 oldest of the siblings. This is at Agnes's wedding. We have Emma and Agnes. Emma later married and gave birth to Edith Marie, and Emma died very shortly thereafter, and Edith lived in the house with the grandparents full time. Agnes's children also came and went at that farmhouse. There we have Bill's parents, And there's his mother in 1916. Look at the flowers that she's carrying. They're spectacular. All right, Bill, he likes to go by Wick.
I recognize them.
First grade, second grade, third grade. What a charmer. Look at him. Okay, this reminds me that I've been talking to people from Bill's era who took the school bus down from the center of town to White Pond Road to bring all the kids up. And it was very interesting. Skip Warren from the Warren Pilot Grove Farm remembers it very well, picking up the kids. But yet all the people that I talked to, they said that they had no idea what was happening in April 1942. It was so secretive. Obviously the school bus then was not allowed to go down and it had to change its route. But people in Stow did not know what was going on. Here's some more pictures of we have Lillian and Edith. Edith is the granddaughter who is living permanently there. Edith in elementary school and graduating from Hale High School. This is the picture on the left is two of the granddaughters, is Betty and Edith. And Bill and I both agree, right? It's one of our favorite pictures. They're 15 or 16 years old. Just look at those faces. This is down on White Pond Road. And then we have the two grandsons that live in this house. Bill Wicke is standing up and he is by the sander, and his cousin, Fred Wright, is sitting there, looking like he might try to sand his foot. He was a free spirit, right, Wick?
Sure was.
Wait, you might get a little closer if you have something to look. You want to tell us about his hat? Fred's hat. What does he have in his head?
Pardon me?
The hat.
Oh, the hat. I think the hat was probably from one of my cousin's boyfriends. He was in the Navy. Two of them were in the Navy, so I don't know where he got the hat, but he wore it all the time.
So keep in mind this hat because it helps us identify in another picture. Okay, Wick, who's a wonderful artist, drew a sketch of the farm. Okay, we see the house, the barn, pig shed, smokehouse, chicken coop, at the well, and it really helps us place the following pictures. His daughter, Lauren, who's an artist, in 2016 painted the house. This house was torn down by the U.S. government. So we're working hard on this one. Here's one of the houses that the family had, pictures the family had. Just note the landscape. And to the right, the tree that is not in leaf, that's a catalpa tree. But look how open the landscape is. Here's another picture that we have. This is John Thiemann, a daughter of Ann Packnott, one of the cousins. The mailbox is on White Pond Road. So John is standing right at the edge of the road. So when you look, think how close that house is to White Pond Road. We reversed the sketch so that you can understand this. Let's go back for a second. We're going to be looking at the garden, looking towards the house, so we're looking east now, towards Maynard. You can see the vegetable garden in the right-hand picture, the back of the house. The picture to the left is blurred, but we can see some of the outbuildings. Wick, you want to make a comment about your house versus the Suico house?
Well, my dad built the house across the street from the farmhouse, and
Okay, are you hearing him?
he finished it in 1942, and he finished, and a week later he was asked to leave. So this is really strange, but he sold the house twice. He sold it to the government, and he sold it to Louis Baskey in Maynard, who took the house and brought it into Maynard because we were close to the Russell's Bridge, and the house is still in Maynard. And believe it or not, my father got a special compensation to build another house. And he did. He started building another house right after he was evicted from the house he finished. So he got the lumber from the barn, from the old farm. They let him take the barn and use the lumber. So he built a house on Crescent Street and began in 1942 or 3 and finished building it in probably 1945, right after the war finished. And we moved in 1946 and 1947. And that's my story
Okay. Thank you, Wick.
so far.
No, it's okay. Okay, we have another landscape picture of the Gatus house. The camera was tilted. It really should be like that because it's flat land. And here's another picture on the side. Now this is a neat one. It's looking down White Pound Road. And in the far right-hand, middle of the page on the far right-hand side, there is a building there. We don't know what it is. Now with all it's forestry now, we can't, it's hard to tell exactly where we are. Here's the picture. This is either on Puffer Pond or Boss Pond. Okay, it's a family, and when we zoom in, take a look at the little boy in the middle. Take a look at that house. We know that's Fred, and this is probably, Wick is probably right here, because we can see people down below, and there were 3 female cousins, and they're on a picnic. Here's the house that Wick was talking about, the brand new house, 1941. If you look very closely on the side staircase, you can see Bill zipping down those stairs. This house versus the Gatus house had running water. It was a wonderful house. Then all of a sudden, the headlines, December 7th, Pearl Harbor. Here in this area, this is what we would have seen in the local Hudson Daily newspaper. As I was going through the newspapers of the Maynard Enterprise and the Hudson Daily Sun, I was struck by this one. Now, this is Assomet Mills in Maynard. Within 2 weeks of actually it would be 10 days, they were working 24/7, employing 2,000 people. They had to get a special permit to work on the weekends, or Sunday especially. They were making different types of cloth, blankets and cloth for clothing for the Army. Kept reading and found this fascinating because Boston had needed a second airport, and land had already been taken by eminent domain in Bedford, a bunch of farmland, and they created the new Bedford Airport, which then the government turned into Hanscom Air Force Base. We are being very patriotic in this area. And remember when I say airways or newspapers, airways would be the radio. Basically, they had the telephone. They might have gone to see newsreels at the movies. And a lot of talking back and forth. Hudson's Sun showed us the USO. Down at the Navy Yard, we had Jim Cagney coming in for all the people working in the Navy Yard. In Stow, this is what we had. People in Stow were given blackout information for the general public. It's an 8-page booklet, how to put the black curtains up in your house so that no light showed. And now this is where Jim Sauter has first-hand information.
I was an air raid warden. I think I was 15 years old, and we had 3 houses on Brook Street, and you could hear the fire whistle at the old fire station in Wood Square. That would continually blow so many times, and that meant air raid warning. Everybody get down somewhere, and so we were issued a helmet, a water pail, a baton, And the water pail is in case we had a fire. Now, I don't know what we were gonna do with one pail of water, but that was all right. So I go down to the different houses, and we had a family from Germany that lived next door, and they were a little skeptical about my telling them to draw their shades. And they finally told them what was going on, and so they drew their shades, and then there was a house and a gas station at the corner of Main and Brook Street, and our house was in the middle. So it was my job to make sure all the shades were down. And then right after that, they implemented all the street lights be turned off for the duration of the war. And there were car headlights. We had to paint them half black and half white, leave the bottom half so you could see where you were going, and the top half had to be painted. Then they made these little gadgets that you could clamp right on and block them off for the night. I'd like to regress just a little bit on the beginning of the ammo dump, and there was a lot of speculation. People know that people from the government were around all over the place, and I got it after the fact that they were looking at the Wayland Flats, where you go from Sudbury, you go down the big hill, and then you get going towards Wayland. That was going to be an airport. But the Corps of Engineers decided, after some research, quick research, that they couldn't find a bottom in the swamp, and they were going to put huge culverts to keep the water running underground. And so they scrapped that, and that's when they went into full-blown action for to put the ammunition depot in this preserve. But we knew that there were people around, nosing around, but it was such a tight secret that nobody had any idea that this was what was going to happen in our neighborhood. That's but the air raids, they'd have the cruisers. I think we had 2 cruisers in Hudson at that time. We'd be driving the streets, checking to make sure all the blinds were down. And then after we got into the war a little bit further, the blinds had to be kept down all day long and all night long. From Pilot Grove Hill, you could see the Boston Harbor, and the glow from all the lights, the submarines could see where Boston was. And that's what the idea was that they weren't quite afraid of the airplanes coming over yet, but the glow from the street lights, car lights, building lights would leave this big glow over the city, so that the ships coming in, or the enemy coming in with a submarine or whatever, would know where they were and where they could land. And I'll go on further with that as we get further on down the road a little bit. But they scrapped the airport very quickly and jumped right into this one here because they couldn't find a bottom to hold any hard rock. It was so far down that it would be literally impossible to put those big concrete water carriers, I call them, or culverts, I guess you'd call them, down into the dirt. And if a plane landed with the weight of the aircraft, they would eventually sink down. That's what, when I got to talk to the commander of the base, I'll tell you about that afterwards.
Yeah. So we know that we had a warning that they're going to have a blackout in Stow. The Maynard Enterprise told us April 9th. And the next day, the Hudson Sun told us that it went smoothly. So we were in practice mode, trying to get this, make sure that we were ready. And I love, if you read the headline on the Hudson Daily, on the right-hand side, the auxiliary police on duty for the first time wore helmets.
Yeah.
Okay, it's getting serious. What was very interesting, especially in the Maynard Enterprise, of the political cartoons, and I have a binder over there of a lot of them, were absolutely wonderful. Here's the grandfather thinking about the Wright brothers, and the grandsons thinking about the different types of planes that they're up in the air, and they had to be able to identify them because they're going to be the air spotters for Uncle Sam. This is cute, but it was very serious. This is the beginning of the Civil Air Patrol. And that leads us right back in to Jim.
Well, I was one of the first members of Civil Air Patrol in Hudson, and we flew out of Marlboro. I was only, 15 to 16, and I think I got up in a plane ride one time. But their job was to patrol the coast. And strange as you may think, they carried hand grenades. That's the only armament that they had. And this is probably a lot of bull story, I don't know. I've never heard any reports on it, but they say one of the Piper Cubs spotted a German sub off the coast of Nantucket and swooped down over it and threw a hand grenade out, and by some miracle, the hand grenade dropped down into the tower and sunk the submarine. That's just a story that was told over and over and over again to us guys. Whether it's true or not, don't have the slightest idea. But
That's a war story.
that's a war story. But that's the beauty of something like this. You can tell these war stories, and I have no way of verifying it, no way of knowing. And also what they also did do was there was a lot of espionage going on, and the subs would come up along the Maine coast or along Cape Cod and Provincetown, where the beaches were bare by then, at that time, and drop people off to infiltrate and find out what's going on. And they did, I know that it was in some of the papers that they did pick up quite a few of them through Civil Air Patrol, spotting them and then notifying the Coast Guard or the Navy or something, and they intercepted quite a few of them. How many got into the country, I have no idea, but that was their main purpose.
And if you were just a little bit younger, like Wick and Bob Trumpold,
Yeah.
for the Civil Air Patrol, here you guys, what were you doing? We were talking about at the house? You were learning different types of planes to spot them?
We had a booklet.
Oh, I'm sorry, right.
At Civil Air Patrol, we were given a booklet, and we had spotter stations where you'd volunteer to watch the planes going over, and you could identify if they were German or whether they're Messerschmitts or whether they were a friendly plane. And actually, some of the busiest stations kept a record of every plane that went through. And if you want another story, I'll give you one now. We had the farm on Brook Street, and we were hog farmers, and we were market gardeners. And right when we declared war, there would be squadrons of planes coming up from New Jersey somewhere, and I could hear them 15 to 20 minutes before they arrived, because they were all prop jobs, and they were only flying at 2,000 feet. And they would come over, right over our fields, and they were headed either to Pease Air Force Base, and then from there they'd go up to the one up in Maine. The tip of Maine is another big Air Force base. Then to Ganver, Newfoundland, then to Iceland, and then to London, bringing these B-25s and B-17s over to Europe. And you probably all remember Kane Concrete and gravel on Main Street where the cement plant is now. Well, Alden and Roger Kane owned that. Alden was a ferry pilot, and after the war, we were neighbors all our lives. He said, Jim, I used to fly over the field. He said, we would take off from New Jersey and head for Pease Air Force Base, then up to Maine, then to Gander, then to Iceland, and then into London. And he said, back then, they didn't have autopilots. They were all manual flying, so if you trim the plane up, you could keep it straight and level at a certain altitude. But when you banked and you let go, it would come back to neutral. But can you imagine flying all those aisles? You had a pilot and a co-pilot and a radio man and an engineer. In the air, just every 4 or 5 hours, you'd land, fuel up again because they didn't have that much capacity. He said, we were exhausted when we got to London. And then we'd sleep for a day or two. Then they'd put us on a transport plane back to Jersey and do the same thing. That's what he did during the whole war. And I thought that was to me, it was quite interesting to think, here I am on the ground, and my father's yelling at me to keep working, weeding the beans or whatever, picking corn, and my eyes are up in the air. And you spoke of Bob Trumbull. Well, he was my flight instructor. I did learn how to fly. He was my flight instructor in Civil Air Patrol when I was 40 years old. He taught me how to fly. But Bob is now up in Michigan, not doing well. But those planes still amaze me. You could hear them 20 minutes before they came, and 20 minutes after they left. So my father says, you waste a whole hour looking up in the air. What's the matter for you? You know, as an Italian family, you just keep working, you don't stop. But I would stop. I didn't care. I just wanted to watch them beautiful planes flying over. And it was really, it made my day every time one of them came by. And that's a true story.
All right, that's a true story. We got that one.
I'd like to make a point that's kind of important to go back a little bit. When the government took over our property, we were all given 2 weeks to evacuate. And it wasn't a joke. They were serious. My grandparents had a farm, and they had cows and animals and pigs and chickens. And they said, if you don't get rid of those, we'll do it for you. But the point is that we had 2 weeks to evacuate. And, you know, and I can remember my grandparents, they must have been upset and angry, but they never showed it. They just packed up and moved out, as simple as that. And we moved into the center of town, center of Stow.
Don't do that yet. Wait a minute. Hold that one. We're going to get to that. We got pictures. Okay. I know these exciting stories. Okay, we just want to really quick remember people. Everyone was buying the war stamps, war bonds. We have examples of it.
Can I intervene again?
Sure, go ahead, Joe.
When my aunt passed away about 10 or 15 years ago, and she had boxes full of war stamps, bonds, the flowers, and I tried to give them to the Stow Historical Society, and they wouldn't take them. So I gave them to the Hudson Historical Society, and they're under her name. There's a couple of $25 war bonds. I don't know what they're worth now. And then the books with the stamps in them, you buy 10-cent stamps. And when you fill the book, they issue you turn that in, they give you a $25 bond. It costs you $17.50 or something like that. And a bunch of ration books, because we were all rationed during the war of what we could buy at the stores and what we couldn't, plus gasoline. But we were farmers, so we had unlimited amounts of gas, and I'll get to that later on. But I was so disappointed that the Stow wouldn't take them, so I turned them into the Hudson Historical Society, and they're still up there somewhere.
So we can go to Hudson to see them. But we fortunately do have some. This was way before me when this happened. Now, for the kids in Stow, they were given these books called My Book to Help America. And Wick's classmate, Bob Trumbull, shared this, has given this to the Historical Society. And he lived on Hudson Road. And it's 20 pages long. We're not going to see 20 pages, but just gives you an idea of, for little kids, what they should do. We have to take more care of everything because you won't be able to buy things until the war is over, because we're going to win the war. Another example, now it's time to learn to save money. Don't buy things for silly things. That won't do anyone any good. Help your country to win the war, save your money, because we need to build the planes, the tanks, the guns, the shells that ships need for victory. We were also here's some examples of ration books, real quick. Fuel ration, big time. Maynard Enterprise, real problem with getting gas for your cars. This is interesting for especially those people from Stow. They were trying to gather old tires, but farmers, orchards, used the tires. They burned them, called smudge burning, for to keep the buds from freezing. So this is Fruit Acres, Howard Harold Priest in Gleasondale area, turning in the tires that he had. Everyone was recycling, salvage. Kids were out there, young kids doing that. The Victory Garden, everyone had a Victory Garden. Now, those of you who know where Sylvia Estabrook lives on Great Road near, towards the lower village, her house, that house, was the Victory Garden for the Stow, that area. She was very proud for us to know that. Then we have this calendar. This is Pilot Grove Farm. Jim was just talking about Pilot Grove Farm. It's the oldest continuously family-owned farm. It's from 1782. We have a calendar. It's from this is a calendar. There it is down there. It's either 40, Skip thought it was 43 or 44. And the funny thing about that, this was found 2.5 years ago in John Mackey's house, outhouse. Only those of you who know John Mackey, who is a Stow legend, this was on the wall in his outhouse. But take a look. It is an incredible treasure, showing how everyone was into the spirit. Lower White Pond Road. There are 2 newspaper articles. April 2nd, this had to be government writing this. They're talking about the people voicing their hearty patriotic cooperation, giving up their land, and how everything is just wonderful and cheery. Then 10 days later, there was another one telling everyone that the War Department has told the selectmen that some of the roads are closed. The roads, you cannot drive on these roads anymore. It was happening that fast. What was happening is that the government was already starting to build these igloos, train tracks. Some people call them bunkers. This is 333 in Stow. So what was going on, and Jim was talking about this, is that Boston had to make sure that their ammunition that they needed was out of the city. It was too close. It was too dangerous. So the War Department needed 3 things. They needed a second airport, they needed a strategic air base, and they needed the ammo depot. Well, there it is. In Bedford became the Hanscom Air Force Base. That was that. And then the Strategic Air Force Base is down in Chicopee area. That was all, again, taken by eminent domain. It was tobacco farms down there. And that's Westover Field. And this was the bomber training base and port of embarkation and debarkation during World War II. What impacts us, especially here, is this ammo depot. They needed it to be about 30 miles out because that's as far as the incoming missiles would go. It needed to have railroads close by, open lands, and some water and wetlands. It's a very simplified statement right there. As you're taking your arc, they were thinking Wayland, and now they said Stow, Hudson, Maynard, Sudbury. This did not happen only in this area. This was happening all up and down the East Coast. One example is that the Portsmouth Naval Yard, they had to protect it. So they took land in Rye, New Hampshire. This was the historic land where the first settlers came in, and the government very nicely built a little monument to note everything that they removed from that land. But these were massive bunkers. They're football fields on each side. Here's, you're looking on, going through it, if I'm stepping into it. Brought the grandsons a couple years ago, so you can see the artillery shells. This is what they were working with. They had these huge gun batteries. These are the mortar rings. Take a look at the date. This date, construction began in Rye, New Hampshire, April 8th, 1942. It began here in Stow, Maynard, Sudbury, Hudson, April 2nd, 1942. Kathy Safara and the Conservation Commission did a fabulous job of overlaying maps so we could understand, see the topography with the land taking. I know it's too far. I'm going to zoom in. First of all, I wanted to show you that the railroads, we had 2 railroads. If you look carefully, you can see the water. Coming in, you can see right here, this is White Pond Road. This here is the Suicos. This is Henry Ford's, Wicks families. We're just catching them right up there. What are we going to do? How are we going to find this? I thought, well, we need information about these people. So I went to the assessor's office, and they said, no problem. We have kept all of the old transfer cards, or 8x11 index cards, of all the transactions going way back. These give the book number and page number at the registry. So with this information, we could go right to the website and find out information about all of the deeds, the land that was taken. It was a gold mine. It was absolutely incredible. Just one example of what a deed looked like. This is one of the shortest ones. Harriet Bird, Red Acre Farm, who had a farm for horses. When they retired, started after World War I for the military horses. She had pasture land over there. She had 28 acres. The corporation agreed to it on April 23rd, and they received payment on September 30th, 5 months. And that's fine if you have land. It was a real problem for those people who were homeowners because they were out of money totally. So we took a look at all the deeds, and we're seeing how fast they were processed. September 9th, September 11th, the 17th, the 19th, the 21st, the 23rd, the October 1st, 2nd, 16, 17, 20, November 2nd, November 7th, 19th, 23rd, 25th, 27th, 30th, December 9th, December 28th, December 29th, January 4th, January 29th. The only 2 deeds we did not have locate were the Perrys and Sarvella. I never did get down to check it out, but we filled in Stow with all of our deeds. When these deeds, by the time these deeds were processed, these people were long gone. Almost by the time they signed it, they were gone. We had another overlay map so we could see the igloos in Stow. Well, on all of it, but we took Stow. You can't see it. I just wanted to remind you of the towns. We zoom in, and hopefully now you can see those green dots. We found it very enlightening. We had no idea. We see here in the wildlife refuge, they have a map showing igloos, but you have no idea exactly where they are, whose land, which town. And this was our mission. We wanted to figure out what was going on. Taking a look at it, we found that there were 9. Now, Tom and I walked and photographed each one of these. If you were here earlier, we had a video going in constantly. It showed you all the igloos in Stow. So we have them all documented. 9 were on Henry Ford's land. 5 were on Charles Lint land. 3 were on the Suico Monoteo land. 1 was on the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and there was some type of structure on the Emo Lato land. It's a part of a foundation. We honestly don't know exactly what it was. It didn't look like a foundation to an igloo. Here's 340. Some of them here in the refuge have been disfigured. But however, this is one of the days when we were photographing. It was cloudy, so it actually made the picture more vibrant, though we don't want to see the graffiti. If you haven't been on a walk or walked up any of these trails, these igloos, they're amazingly long. I had to do a panoramic on this to get it all in. These are the railroad spurs. They brought in their heavy construction equipment, moved the great farm soil up so they could build railroad tracks in it. Lower White Pond Road. We talked about 2 articles. There were actually a third. The Boston Globe came to the Suico family house. Here it is close up. It's an old newspaper. It's best we could do with it. They did spell Stow in the paper with an E. That is not a typographical error right there. And it says they were giving it up for patriotic duty, and this is the grandparents and the grandchildren. The photographer and news reporter came in. They were tasked. They were told exactly what to do. They were supposed to position them. All of this the teacups are empty. They gave the kids a little snack. The girl's mother was appalled. She would have nothing to do with this. They positioned them, took the picture, wrote some notes, and they left. And this was put in the Boston Globe. But we figure it's about April 11th. We don't have we know it's the Globe, but we don't have which day in April. Sylvia is standing, Vivian is at the bottom. Now I'm going to begin reading their words. And here we go. It was the spring of 1942, and our mother had seen unfamiliar cars going along White Pond Road. At the beginning of April, 2 men were standing on our side lawn. When she asked them what they were doing, one curtly responded, "What does it look like we're doing?" She said, "It looks like you're surveying." "We have not hired anyone to survey. Why are you here?" He replied, it was confidential, and that was the end of that. Gee, we had heard rumors that Henry Ford had been planning an airport on his property. They're wondering, maybe it was this, but those were only rumors. Then shortly thereafter, 2 men dressed in business suits came to the door around 6 p.m., showed their federal credentials, and told our family we had to vacate our property within 10 days. We could not take anything that was nailed down. We would be paid. A check would be sent. When? They did not know. They started digging 2 days after we were told to leave. The government property signs went up a couple days later. These men came and went from farm to farm, house to house, with a checklist marking off as they took the land. No one slept much during those 10 days. We worked day and night. Grandfather had no intentions of selling his cows to a cattle dealer, so we sold them at auction. Now, we have no picture of the Nelson farm. I talked with Skip Warren, and I asked him, I had found this picture of auction in Derby, Connecticut, and he said this was a wonderful representation, not so much of the Nelson farm, but what an auction would have looked like in this era. He was saying how the people would have come in, dressed up a bit with the top hat, the coats. And he thought this was a wonderful picture to show, to give you an idea of what it would look like. Ours was the first farm taken. Our land was one of the best in Stow and was next to Ford's property where the government was placing fence which would surround the military land. The house was to be used as a guard shack, we were told. During that 10-day span, the official approached our father and asked him if he would be interested in guarding the gate, which was going to be between our land and the Henry Ford lot. He said, of course. He had nothing else to do. He had no choice. He then watched as the nailed and screwed down things which belonged to us, things we were not allowed to take, were taken by military personnel. Dad also drove ammunition from the depot post to Boston. All of this was done between 2 and 4 a.m. Sylvia and Vivian made a list of all the tools that they could remember from their childhood that they had. And so these are some of the equipment that they had in the early 20s and 30s. They had the hay fork, the hay tender. They had 2 dump trucks. These are pictures from a fair, so just use your imagination on those. But we have this one. There's a hay wagon. There's the barn in the back. They had a tractor. This is the same tractor that we saw earlier that Sylvia was standing on the hood, and now Vivian is sitting there. Her father, she is under 2. Her father is holding onto her. Believe it, you can see it when you get close up. John Waddell made this from an old Ford car. If you take a look in the back, you can see the tire. He put chains on it so he wouldn't get stuck in the fields when he was plowing. They had many animals. When we took this picture in October of 2016, if you remember several years ago, it was a tremendous drought. And the duck pond was dry, but there it is. They had ducks, dairy cows, pigs, horses. We have a fabulous picture of 2 of their horses. They had their turkeys, sheep, chicken, rabbits, cats, and the family dog Fido. As the Finnish families heard about our situation, they called one after another. Having a 3-party line did allow news to spread rapidly. Our mother was translator for many of the Finnish families. They could not buy newspapers because they couldn't read the language they couldn't speak. Plus, the newspapers were not writing anything that was happening. It was secretive. Our mother, Elsie, found it difficult to explain what was going on because she was very upset and found the whole situation unbelievable. Over the years, we had added a 2-car garage, a shed, and a milk house, which was mandated by the government in order to keep the milk at the correct temperature while processing it and storing it as well. We had added a pasteurizing system, which was required. Every penny went back into the farm. The government inspectors came every 3 months and inspected the farm and everything else which they do with the milk. Grandfather never failed an inspection. He cared very much for his cows and all the animals. The cows all had names, as did most of our pet animals. Most of our furniture was put out on the front lawn to be sold or given away. People knew we had to get rid of it, so they paid what they wanted. It was Stow's first yard sale. We could not take most of our possessions because we had nowhere to go. That was being worked out with everything else it took to leave the farm in 10 days. The Sweekos had probably one of the best dairy farms in the area. Everything was absolutely brand new. Dad phoned the officials and told them that his girls wanted their playhouse and that their grandfather had built them. It took almost an act of Congress to finally convince the government that the girls needed their playhouse more than the military did. And Vivian wanted you to know that the playhouse was rectangular, had the door and the window in the front with the curtains. You could walk right into it. She said that she and Sylvia had tantrums, crying fits until they got their way, and they had to then convince the federal government that the military did not need a playhouse. Up until 2016, Sylvia was still working for the EPA, very interesting, with all of this, and they were purging documents. And one of the documents that they found, this was 2 weeks before we did our first program, this is the document from the War Department that said that they had agreed to sell the land. When you get closer, it was dated June 3rd. What Sylvia found very interesting is that she had always thought it was April 9th. This said it was April 11th, and they vacated the house and the farm April 19th. So it was either 8 or 10 days to dismantle their whole life. And she said the federal officials became more lenient with the taking of farms after hours, and some owners were allowed to take items which were nailed down or screwed down. And a little bit, Wick will tell you a little bit more about that. The government was very hard on this family. Our family paid $6,500 for 40 acres in 1919 and acquired another 6 acres a few years later. In 1942, the government paid us $5,550 for the farm buildings and 40 acres, plus another $150 for the acres we purchased from Henry Ford. We had verbal promise that we could buy back the land when the war ended. And what it was is they were paid 80% of the value of the buildings if it was like 1923 instead of 1942. Here's an example. This is their deed. As we get closer, you can see the date. We received payment in September. Since farmers were considered self-employed when Social Security came in 1935, they were not included. Any money the farmers saved went back into the farm to buy what was needed to keep it running according to government regulations. Not only did we lose the farm, we lost most of the income. We lost all income from both grandparents and both parents. How to buy a house with no money? Now this is what I found most interesting. And Sylvia finishes by saying, after a lot of paperwork, we are able to move the playhouse to our father's family farm on Great Road in Stow, thanks to Harry Dexter's horse and wagon. Harry, with his horse and wagon, was kept very busy helping us move to Great Road, where we lived above the Wanatao's shed until our family was able to find another spot. Our grandparents moved to a small house further west on Great Road. Now, in our brains, we don't think, how did they move? They moved by a horse and wagon. You know, there was no moving vans that came in. No one came to help them. They had to find people in town to come and supply the labor and help them to get out of this hard situation. So we had a rushed relocation of these families. When I do newspapers, work with them, I try to take one picture, full page picture, just so I remember what the newspaper looks like, not one concentrated article. And it was absolutely amazing because on this one, and I hadn't read it, there was one more article. Town mourns Mrs. Farnham, age 92. When did she die? April 11th. This is the house that Wick and his family all moved into. For you people who understand Stow, right here is the Stow House of Pizza. Then we have the next one, it would be the dentist office and Family Federal. This house has now been dismantled and relocated. So they were right on the main road. Okay, Wick, can you see it? Who's on top of the woodpile? Is that you or Fred?
That looks like Fred.
Fred's on top, king of the pile. Okay, oops, excuse me. Okay, this is his cousin Ann, her husband John, and right behind John, if you can see it, it's faint. It's a hand water pump. Wick, in your house, brand new house, what did you just get?
Did I what?
Running water, right?
Yeah, well, they wasn't running water when we moved in.
Did you have running water here
They,
too?
they made, my dad was plumber, so he was
Okay.
pretty good.
All right, so it's quite a change. So everybody moved into this very old house. And Wick, you were telling me that there was also all of her belongings, a lot of papers and all her furniture, everything was still there?
Everything was thrown, yeah.
Yeah, so they moved in with their things with all of this. And now we're saying, oh, if we only had had a chance to see what she had. But that didn't happen. This house, there's a picture of it in 1982. It was dismantled, moved board by board to Lyme, Connecticut. And a few of these pictures, we ran them through Photoshop. They're very faint. His Uncle Ed is just above the one in the 1940. And this picture, it was very faded, but going through Photoshop, it's sort of surreal. It came out really nice. Here's Ed, his Uncle Ed. It's Ed and his niece Ann, who became a WAC. Her husband, and that's Bill Wicke right there. They're in Boston. And Ed and John. They're all into the military. All right. You want to do this? You were talking about how the Suecos could not take down anything. They had corner cabinets that they had built, into corners, nailed in. They had to leave them. However, to build this house on Crescent Street, what wood did your father use?
My dad worked in a mill, but the government let them take the lumber from the barn on the farm. So my dad built this house with the lumber from the farm.
Yeah, so he was able to take the barn apart. And from on where the Suecos couldn't do anything. So the government loosened up afterwards and was more lenient with the families. This house is there today. It's very sad. Too bad, huh? The Suecos, the grandparents went to 270 Great Road. The Hudson Cooperative Bank was cooperative, and they floated them a loan because they actually had no money. They had nowhere to go, and they had no money, and the bank came to the rescue. There they are in front of their house. Sylvia and Vivian and family lived over the shed of their other grandparents' house on Great Road. You could sort of see it there. I had to take it from the edge of the road so you sort of get an idea. The playhouse was moved to this yard. And then a year and a half later, when the parents had got more money and were able, they bought a little house on Red Acre Road, and they were going to leave the playhouse here. And what do you think those ladies did again? They had a fit, and they moved the playhouse to Red Acre Road. And Vivian told me it was wonderful because now they were a little bit older because it became their schoolhouse. So they played school. And then as they got older, Vivian was very much into collecting bugs and in nature, so it became her bug house. The trains came in here to the depot. When you walk the trails, every once in a while you might see a red platform. These were the water tanks. And way back here, I'm going to outline it, there's the igloo back there. So Bill has an interesting recollections about these trains because he lived so close to here. He had easy access to the noise of the trains. Jim, excuse me.
We used to tell time by the trains. They would start at 6:30 in the morning. You'd have 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8:10, then 9 o'clock, and then there'd be one coming back from Boston at 10:10 and one going to Boston at 10:10. Then there'd be nothing till the afternoon. But and there was water towers. Well, there was two stations in Hudson. There was one on Pope Street and on Main Street where the corner of Broad Street and Main Street. That was the Railway Express terminal. That's where the freight cars would come in with with commodities, and the coal cars would go to Night Fuel, and from there that spur would go to Marlboro if they needed stuff going to Marlboro. And when there was a water tower on Pope Street, there was a water tower in Gleasondale, and there was another one at Ordway's Crossing. That's on Palmetto Road. About 20 or so years ago, the state had talks of reinstating that line, and I went to their hearings, and I was talking to the quote-unquote engineers that were going to make the final decision. And I said to them, I says, have you people been on 117, Route 20, and Route 9 in the morning, and Route 2? Oh, no, we haven't got that far yet. And I says, what are you talking about? Well, we're talking about the feasibility of would it be used. And I said, of course it would be used. It was used before. And I said, everything from Boston is moving west. And I said, we desperately need one. Well, they came up with the brainstorm. They were going to put a huge parking lot on 495. And it would be something like the one on 128 in Wellesley or Newton, one of them, where they had a big station and parking, and the people would park their cars for the day, get on the train, and go into Boston. All of a sudden, out of the blue, they decided to scrap the whole thing and make walking trails out of it. So here we are, where we are now, which is a disgrace in my eyes. But so people just get on your politicians' backs and say, hey, wake up, we're out here now, not back there. But anyway, we always knew when there was a load of ammunition coming in, because right away from the Poor Farm crossing, the Poor Farm was in Hudson, right at the railroad crossing on Main Street, down by Kane's gravel pit. There's now a storage place there. They would put trucks right across the road with armed guards. And from Fairbanks Road in Sudbury, they would put a blockade up there, and the trains would come in, drop their loaded cars on the spur, and come in and pull out the empty cars, and then bring the loaded cars back in to be loaded. And then they take these and park them somewhere until they were loaded. And also there would be the people that handle this ammunition were trained just for that purpose. And they were stationed at Devon's. And if I was in the field and I saw 3 or 4 Army buses heading that way, I knew there was a trainload of ammo coming in. And the only way you could cross that line was if you lived in that area, they would let you go home. But someone would follow you to your home with a Jeep or car or something. And when it was all clear, they would open, when they felt it was clear and the ammo was safely stored and the trains were out of their way, they would open the road up again. But sometimes it would last, while they were jockeying the trains around 2 or 3 hours, they'd have half-ton trucks and submachine guns. And you didn't get by unless you could prove that you lived in that area. And that was really something.
Now into, he has a very interesting story from 1944. He's age 15. He has a band in Hudson. Okay, and then this will lead us right into the conclusion. Go for it.
Okay. I played in a country western band when I was in high school, and I don't know if any of you recall Manny's Cafe in the corner of Broad Street. Somebody must remember Manny's. Come on, Bill, you were there in your younger days. But anyway, we would play Friday and Saturday nights down there. And one Friday or Saturday night, this fella comes walking up, and he says, "Can you guys use a Hawaiian steel guitar player?" And we looked at each other, and they said, "Yeah, we'll hear you." He said, "I'll be back in a half hour." He said, "Okay." He came back, set his Hawaiian guitar up. He was with us for 4 years. And so finally we asked him what he did for a living. Oh, he says, "I'm the commander of the ammunition dump." I says, "What?" And I says, "You're doing this? This is my hobby. I love playing." And I says, and when I got to know him better, I said, "Is there any chance of getting a tour?" "I can give you a tour." He says, "I'm the commander." So I says, "When can I come up?" So it was a Sunday afternoon. He says, "Come on up after 2 o'clock. So I got in my car at the farm, and I wasn't supposed to be driving then anyway, but I drove up there, and the guard stopped me, and I says, "Commander so-and-so is waiting for me." So he called him. He says, "Oh yeah, let Jim in." So I went up to his, he says, the guy says, "There's his house right there, you park right there." Pulled up and parked. He come out. He says, "What do you want to see?" And I says, "Look at all this equipment." There was bulldozers and front-end loaders and trucks all sinking in the dirt. I mean, you couldn't see the bottom of their tires. And I says, "How about bringing one of those down to the farm?" I said, "I could really use that." And he said, "Jim, they would kill me. I would have to pay for it." He said, "That's all surplus equipment. It'll either get scrapped, they'll take it and use it somewhere else." But he said, "It's been sitting here now for 4 years, and it hasn't moved. We haven't started them. We haven't done a thing with them." And I said, "Wow." And I kept drooling over those pieces of equipment, because on a 75-acre farm, you can use any kind of equipment. So he says, "You want to see the bunkers?" And I said, "Well, yeah." So we got in his Jeep, and he drove down. I don't know which one it was. We went to 2 of them. He got up, and this one had sliding doors on it, and they were that thick concrete at about a foot. He grabs the handle, and the thing just slides by itself, opens up. And I says, "You move that whole door?" He says, "They are perfectly balanced." And so we went in, and there was bombs and field ammunition from the top to the bottom. And he says, "You want to see another one?" And I said, "Sure." So I said, "Can I move the door?" I couldn't believe it. Just got on the other end, just and it slid right up, and he locked into place, and he put the padlock on it or whatever it was. Then we went down to another one. And I says, "What did he get all the dirt all over him for?" He says, "That's camouflage." He says, "We've got 2 or 3 feet of dirt, and we planted trees and shrubs and grass." So he says, I've been up in a plane, and he says, from the air, you would never know that they were there. They fit right in with the terrain, which is smart thinking on somebody's part. But anyway, we went down to the next one. That one was loaded with bombs for airplanes. They were just stacked from one end to the other, just enormous, enormous. And that was my sojourn into the ammo dump. But it was really fascinating that the tracks went right up to each loading dock or unloading dock, whichever they were doing. And when the trains crossed the highway, also they had.
Can you talk into the mic, please? We can't hear you.
It's disconnected.
It's disconnected. Okay. Anyway, well,
It's connected.
should I put the switch? It's working now. Okay. Anyway, I'll start off where I got into the base, and the doors slid just with a push of a hand, and I saw all the ammunition stacked, and we went down to another one. That one had all bombs in it that the planes carried, and the same story. Then I asked them, "Why is all the dirt covering these igloos?" And he says, "We put all that and planted shrubs and trees So he says, I've been up in an airplane and you can't tell that they're there. The tracks are actually camouflaged, but you wouldn't know it. The trees are made so that they cover the tracks coming in. And so that was my excursion and drooling over all the equipment they had sitting there, just sinking in the dirt that I could have used on the farm. And I said, oh, man. So that's my experience going through going into the ammo depot. But he was one of the nicest people and down to earth, and we had a great time with him for 4 years. He played with us for 4 years till he got transferred.
Okay, we're going to take a look now. Thank you, Jim. What happened to these houses? The Ugatis Wiki house was torn down by the Army.
Speak into the mic? Yeah, your mic's not right in there.
Okay. Anything?
Yeah,
Yep,
it's
we got it.
on.
Okay. Okay, I'll start all over. The Ugatis house was torn down by the Army. Take a look at the catalpa tree. This is what we needed to look for to find its location. We found it. We found the original tree and a new growth. Trying to find it was another process. We tried 3 times. This is showing you we were successful. If you look very carefully, there's the clearing there. That is part of Wick's grandparents' driveway, circular driveway right there. We really couldn't find it. Wick's in New Jersey. We're up at here, the refuge. We tried 3 times. We called them, saying, Wick, help us out. We can't find it. And he said, well, it's easy. The Nilsson stone wall is perpendicular to White Pond Road. Of course, right? We can do that. So just try to get it up there on the left-hand side. We're perpendicular. Tom and I walked down. We stood against the stone wall. Wick said, well, then look towards White Pond Road. All right, so we looked towards White Pond Road. Okay, there it was. It was really easy. However, if you're just not understanding the footprint of this land, it just looks like any other spot. But I will forever know where it is now. Wick's house, as he told you, was moved to Maynard. This is the location right behind this brush here. If you go back, you can see the foundation. It's crumbly, but it's there. There's the house in Maynard, 2016. The Suico Wanateo house was used by the military. The farm buildings were struck by lightning in 1955. We know from some pictures it was there in 1957. It was either torn down or burned. This is the location of the Suico Wanateo house. These are the igloos on their land. Then in January 2017, we were offered the Historical Society was offered to look at the U.S. Army Natick Labs 1950 photo albums. These albums showed the pictures. They documented the buildings that remained when Natick Labs took it over. Each page looked like this. I went through it once and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I started through the second time and I saw this picture. There was actually 2. There's one underneath. But this picture I looked at and I said, I know it. And it said it was, this picture was taken in 57 here, and it had 3 numbers. Okay, so the U.S. Army kept renaming it and renumbering it. There's no maps to match these numbers, which makes it really tricky here. But look what it is. It's the Suico house. There it is. And the picture that should have triggered it is this one, the earlier. I didn't see it in that one for whatever reason. There's their barn. And this, it said it was burned. There's a little writing right there. It burned August 1955, struck by lightning. Okay, there is the side, the garages, struck by lightning, August 1955. There's the little, I'm not sure how they used that house, but there it is. In 53, it was struck by lightning, August 1955, burned. There's the house. I never saw a picture of the side of the house. They only took the front. And there were two pictures. One was 53 and one was 57. So we can get the house to 1957. We had one other house that's very special on this road, the Pocky-Sipple house. This is the house. This is an actual photo, probably in the 30s to 1940. When Wick saw this, do you remember what you said, Wick?
I recognize it, yeah.
Yeah, he looked at it and he said, "That's my driveway." All right, it was his driveway looking at this historic house. This is a Jonathan Wood house that was caught up in this. Here is the guard shack up there at the entrance. It was right up at the top at the north entrance. The barns in the house. Another one of the barn. The house from the front. This house remained standing in 1961. The government was going to either take it down, but they offered someone to buy it and move it in a month. And a family in Sudbury bought it, and they took it apart board by board, and they moved it. Here's another picture before it was moved. Here's the house where it used to be. Here it is in Sudbury today.
Where in Sudbury?
I'm not going to tell you, I'm sorry. Because it's a private home. So we'll leave it at that. This is when you walk down White Pond Road, you see the open meadow. The open meadow was owned by the Pocky-Sippo, Cervella, Lint, Succhio, Wanteo families. We went, the next day it was sunny. It's flat, but I was doing panoramic, and I slightly went uphill. I gave it a hill when it didn't have a hill, but it was a beautiful day. This is the meadowland.
Is that where Henry Ford wanted to build his airport?
No, Henry Ford had a lot of land. So it was, from what I understand, it would be down in the land that he owned. He was south of that land.
Want an interesting by note of Henry Ford?
Yeah, well, yeah, we never know about Henry, yes.
Well, anyway, he was living in some house up there, but he always ate at the Hudson Diner on Main Street in Hudson. It was open 24 hours a day. And when they decided to close the diner, he bought it, shipped it up to his park in Detroit,
Yeah, in Dearborn.
and the diner originally came from Marlboro. Then the bus clerk family bought it, moved it to Hudson. Then Henry Ford moved it to Detroit.
To Greenville Village, yep.
And I went in there, and because I used to work there. We worked at the farm on days, because in a family farm, you never get paid for working. So I had a short-order cook job at night. I cooked hamburgers, coffee, or whatever they needed at the Hudson Diner. So I walked in there, and the girl says, "What can I tell you about this place?" I says, "You can't tell me a thing." I says, "I spent many hours behind that counter." Well, they brought down everybody from the top dogs down to I don't know who, and interviewed me. But they never knew that the big window in the back was to the kitchen and the back part of it where they made up all the meals. Out front, they did the eggs and bacon and hamburgers and hot dogs. But so they added that to their list. But Henry Ford was quite a guy, I guess.
He was quite a guy.
Yeah.
We had one other house. Emma Park Scott House is on Sudbury Road. And she was constantly going up and down the road asking these men in the business suit, "Are we next? Are we next? Are you taking my house? Are you taking my house?" Here's the house today. It survived. They took 9.5 acres here, and they took another 13 acres further up higher. When you go down Sudbury Road, you will see the fencing. It's very hard to take a picture of that. I had to put some arrows in so you could see it. And our house was not taken. It just made it out of there. We have one other deed in Stow. And I was very perplexed about this. It said the United States of America to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was giving over 388 acres back to Stow and Sudbury for exclusive use as public park and recreational purposes. We're thinking, what is this land? There's the part of the deed. Here's all the acreage. It's Stow and Sudbury. So I went to the Conservation Commission and looked at their open space land, and down at the very bottom, that's the state land. This is the refuge. You look at the refuge map, take a look. So that is the beginning. So when we drive up the road here, we're actually going through a little bit of state land. And this open area right here, that's the fire academy right there. And that takes us to the refuge today. We are finished. And if you'd like your mushrooms, you can find some here.
I'd like to make one comment.
Me too, go ahead.
Listen, I hope you take away from this something. My grandparents were in their 60s when they took the land away, and there was emotional and a psychological effect on their lives. And they only lived a short while after, really, because it led to their demise, really. It was a terrible day for them.
It was very difficult for the older generations. Okay, we are very short on time. I'm being told that we have to.
I had heard that there was a force patrol that covered the refuge or the.
I vaguely remember that, but that was at the beginning, way back.
But you remember?
Yeah, I remember the horse patrol vaguely.
Thank you.
Okay,
They now patrol the whole area with cameras, because my son lives right off of Queens Lane, and there's cameras, because he got caught sneaking in behind the fence a couple of times. Anyway, one quick thing. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate doing this, and it brings back a lot of memories. And one thing that wasn't mentioned is that we had scrap drives in the early 40s. And we were very fortunate on the farm. We had a couple of trucks. And again, I was 14 years old, and I'm driving the trucks. And we went around house to house picking up scrap once a week. And we filled up the Harriman School parking lot with a mountain of metal that all went to making bombs and tanks and whatever. But we did that about once a week or once every other week. We go around house to house, and people would leave their scrap metal out front, and we pick it up and take it there. Thank you. I enjoyed it. I hope you did. Hope we will do it again sometime.
I want to thank Marilyn for the presentation. Liz is gone, so she said, could you say something? So I'm thanking everyone who came. And I want to thank the refreshment committee for doing such a great job. And if you brought something in and it's not gone, don't hesitate to take it with you, because I can't eat all that stuff. So thank you again. Marilyn, thank you. And
it's a wonderful audience. I know you need to stretch. I feel like I'm in my classroom. Everywhere you got to start moving.
thank you for coming.
Showing those open fields area?
Yeah.